US President-elect Joe Biden has warned of fatal consequences to Americans over delays in the presidential transition process. Biden has urged the Trump administration to allow his team to coordinate on pandemic response plans. President Trump has so far declined to begin a formal handover process, focusing instead on disputing his election loss. Here's what Biden had to say during a speech in Delaware.
More people may die if we don't coordinate. The vaccine is important. It's of little use until you're vaccinated. So how do we get the vaccine? How do we get over 300 million Americans vaccinated? What's the game plan? It's a huge, huge, huge undertaking. To get it done, prioritize those greatest in need and working our way through it, and also cooperate with the World Health Organization and the rest of the world in dealing with this. If we have to wait until January 20th to start that planning, it puts us behind over a month, month and a half. And so it's important that it be done, that there be coordination now or as rapidly as we can get that done.
US President-elect Joe Biden speaking there. And his scientific advisors are planning to meet with drug makers to map out a nationwide vaccination plan without assistance from the Trump administration. And because the situation is getting increasingly serious, the US is seeing its biggest spike in coronavirus infections and deaths since the start of the pandemic. New cases have more than doubled in the past month. The latest hotspots are central states such as North and South Dakota, Iowa, Wyoming and Wisconsin. They are all reporting record numbers of hospitalizations. In terms of new cases, the highest numbers are in the populous states. Those include Illinois, California, Georgia and Michigan. With more than 1 million total cases and over 20,000 deaths, Texas continues to be one of the worst hit. DW's Carolina Chimoy went to El Paso, where hospital managers say their facilities are close to being overwhelmed.
El Paso is on the border with Mexico, but no one is talking about the wall anymore. The pandemic is raging here. Numbers are soaring.
Right now we have about 241 inpatient COVID-19 cases. Now to contrast that with about 45 days ago, we only had 30. But a lot of those people that you see going into these tents behind me, they will wind up inside our hospital.
Health authorities are already arranging to move patients to other cities if the hospitals become overwhelmed, planning for months of strain.
There's going to be a long period yet before a vaccine is here. So we have to make sure that we are ready for this winter, not only here in El Paso, but also around the country. Resources are finite.
There is already a backlog in dealing with the dead. Refrigerated morgues outside the hospitals serve as makeshift mortuaries. Funeral homes in El Paso are so overwhelmed that families sometimes have to wait a week to bury a loved one. Funeral directors themselves are struggling to cope. The level of stress is very high because it is not comparable to how it used to be. Some months ago, we had around 30 services per month. Right now, we're having around 80.
This second wave of the pandemic is not only hitting record numbers of people, many of whom could die. Local lockdowns in El Paso to try and curb the spread are wreaking havoc on businesses. Here in El Paso, there's a 10 p.m. curfew. But even during the day, many people stay at home.
This is where the economic effects of the pandemic can most clearly be seen. Downtown El Paso seems abandoned. Also, this restaurant wasn't able to keep most of its staff. Now the owner has to attend the few clients himself. The current situation had a clear impact on his political decision. He voted for Joe Biden. I knew he could do better than Donald Trump, and I think we all hope the same. We hope for a different government that supports us. Uriel Samaniego works just around the corner. For him, the presidential race is not over yet. Biden is not going to be the president. It's going to be Donald Trump. He feared his business might be hit by the pandemic, but now he has orders until July next year. Republicans, he says, are good for the construction sector. Despite his support for Trump, he has his own opinion on COVID-19, especially after he tested positive. Everyone is going to get the virus and we're going to fill up the hospitals. Testing is one of the crucial instruments to avoid this problem. Miguel coordinates 10 testing centers in El Paso. He works for a private company that is being paid by the state of Texas. But his main concern in the pandemic is not political. I don't have fully knowledge of what Joe Biden is planning to do in his administration, but until now, we haven't had any kind of difficulties with the current administration. I don't think it's a matter of resources. The main concern is how to communicate to the people what to do or not. Trump supporters, Biden supporters, two different sides that seem to come together in El Paso, in fear of the coronavirus.
And here's a quick look at some of the other developments in the pandemic. South Korea has announced it will tighten social distancing rules from Thursday in the greater Seoul area and parts of Gangwon province amid a resurgence of infections. Sweden is limiting public gatherings to 8 people following a surge in new cases. Unlike most countries, Sweden has avoided lockdowns, relying on voluntary measures. And from Thursday, New Zealanders will have to wear masks on public transport in Auckland and on planes nationwide. This follows several small outbreaks in Auckland.
Well, no one in the U.S. can say that they were not warned. Public health experts predicted back in March and April that without a well-designed strategy, the virus would emerge again with a vengeance. Take a listen to what the governor of Michigan told her state today.
We are in the worst moment of this pandemic to date. The situation has never been more dire. We are at the precipice and we need to take some action. Because as the weather gets colder and people spend more time indoors, this virus will spread. More people will get sick and there will be more fatalities.
Well, unfortunately, Michigan Governor Whitmer's dark forecast, it applies to the entire country. It's expected that 150,000 more people could die by mid-January if radical steps are not taken. Let's go now to our correspondent, Carolina Chamoy. She is in Washington, D.C. tonight. Good evening to you, Carolina. There are 2 promising vaccines in the pipeline now, but thousands and thousands could die before we ever see that first injection. Is all of America ready to return to a lockdown?
Well, most of the people don't want it because they have economic reasons for that. There are restaurants, there are small businesses. They could not cope without help of the government and, again, a lockdown. So most part of the population don't want a lockdown, but this would be the fastest way to fight against the virus. And it's going to be really a long time until the vaccine arrives and is able to solve. It's not that all of a sudden it can be sold. Also, who is going to be the first group of people who gets that vaccine? That is a very important question. Probably the health workers, physicians, nurses. So we can't count yet on that vaccine. People don't want, and probably economically they can't handle a lockdown. This is the big problem that not only the United States, but several countries around the world are having right now. And this is also what I became really aware of being right now being in Texas. I arrived yesterday. I filmed a report there about COVID-19 and talking to the physicians, the nurses, and also to people who have their own restaurants and their own small businesses. That made me be very aware of this problem we're in.
Carolina, were you struck by the people that you spoke to in El Paso who say that the Trump administration has done a good job in dealing with the pandemic? Well,
yes, Brent, because it's pretty clear that Donald Trump didn't take this pandemic seriously from the beginning on. And then you can see the immediate effects. You can see these refrigerated morgues. You can see people who are dying and patients and the family members of the people who died and who are not receiving the way they would like to say goodbye in a funeral home because their loved ones who have died have to be in this refrigerated morgue. So these are really, really tragic stories, and then hearing from someone who also was infected himself. And this man, he even took chlorine because Donald Trump said to do so. Oh, no. And he's completely convinced that Donald Trump is not only right in the political things he said, but also in his speech about healthcare and COVID-19, especially since Donald Trump himself was infected. So of course, we were the whole team. We were quite shocked to hear that. That was, it was shocking. And at the same time, we noticed that one of his main reasons to support Donald Trump were the economic reasons. His business is doing very well. The construction sector is doing well right now because people are renovating their homes. Right. There are a lot at home. So he has work and orders until next year, as you heard.
Yeah. We know that El Paso is on the U.S.-Mexico border. What's the situation like on the Mexican side for people who contract the virus?
Well, officially, there are also certain measures on the Mexican side, and they're supposed to wear a mask always and stay at home. But you also have to consider that we're talking about a very poor side of Mexico, and a lot of people, they prefer to work and go out and have something to eat by the end of the day. So the virus is not their main concern. Surviving is their main concern on the Mexican side. Also, a lot of these people cross the border. The ones who have a visa, usually they would cross the border and they would work, for example, in restaurants as cooks or waitress in a restaurant. And then they would go back and live in the cheaper side, the Mexican side. And now they are not able to do that anymore because they can't cross the border even though they have a visa. The only ones who are allowed to cross the border are the ones who are U.S. citizens. And for example, the owner of the restaurant I talked to, he lives in the Mexican side, but he is a U.S. citizen himself. That is why he was allowed to vote. But he ran out of waiters because they were all Mexicans who had a visa and who are not able to go to the U.S. side now. Yeah,
that's right. That shows you the power of a passport there. We know we've got 2 months to go before the Biden administration can take any action. I mean, where do you see the U.S. at the end of this year? Do you see it in a big lockdown, or do you see even more death and misery on the horizon?
Well, we have to see what this special task force of Joe Biden plans to do. This is seems to be a very high-level group of professionals and physicians and experts in this field. And we know, not only from the United States, but also from Germany and from Europe, that the most effective thing, the most effective measure is a lockdown. But we also know how our economies worldwide can be really hit by a lockdown. And we'll have to wait. I can't tell you where I see the United States, but I definitely can tell you that this virus is, it's killing a lot of people in this country right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the sad truth in the U.S. tonight. DW's Carolina Chamoy on the story for us in Washington, D.C. Carolina, thank you.
Thank you.